Here now is a river running very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hang on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. The elders say, let go of the shore, push off from the shore, go to the middle of the river and keep your head above water. Know that the river has its destination. The elders say, see who is there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing seriously, least of all ourselves. Gather yourselves. Everything we do now must be done in a spirit of celebration, for we are the ones we have been waiting for.
I'm so pleased to get a chance to talk to Meg Wheatley today. It's an interview I've been looking forward to doing for some time. For those that don't know Meg, she's an internationally acclaimed author of 10 books, an expert on leadership and attitudinal change. Her book, Leadership and the New Science, is listed by Xerox Foundation as one of the 10 most important business books of all time. But the real reason I'm interested in talking with her today is regarding her work in the climate collapse space. So welcome, Meg, and thanks for being with me today. So look, that is actually one of the reasons that I'm most drawn to you, Meg, is that you're one of the few spiritual teachers, I think, that is coming out and saying collapse is certain. And given that you, in your earlier life, you were so much about upgrading human systems and improving human systems.
Right.
I am just really interested in your journey. Like, when did you realize these systems would in fact collapse, and what's that journey been like for you?
Well, when did I first know? I think it was, it would have been in the 2000s. Clearly, maybe at the turn of the millennium. My work, though, in understanding collapse is deeply historical. And I think that is a critical difference in my perspectives. They're founded on history. They're founded on the pattern of collapse as expressed by major historians actually for over 100 years. But recently, when I wrote Who Do We Choose to Be, it was about tracking where we are on the pattern of collapse as well established and documented in major U.S. civilizations over the length of time of our existence in a civilized way. So, and to that I could add my spiritual training, which is quite deep, and wanted to answer the question whenever that appeared. I think it was probably certainly when I wrote my book in 2012, So Far From Home. It was, look where we are. We are dealing with emergent phenomena. Let me correct that Latin here. An emergent phenomena, plural, that cannot be changed. And we could talk more about this because I think that's one of our great blind spots, if just not downright refusal to understand how does life change. But it was so easy to see where we were against this pattern. And that then led to, well, what are we going to do about it? And that's what we should talk about. Once we understand we are in a time of dying and destruction, who do we choose to be is my question.
Yes, and I think that's the critical question. And I given that most of the people that will be watching this also understand that collapse is inevitable, it all boils down to that question pretty much straight away. I did want to sort of pass by, there is a question around collapsing systems that I wanted to bring to you
Yeah.
before we get into how then shall we be, which is this whole question of division. I think one of the things, like there's many things I expect in collapse, but one of the things that I think that has taken me a little bit by surprise, for no reason other than I wasn't,
You're
I don't know
surprised.
why, but so much division. I mean, division about everything, division about vaccines, division about the importance of what
Everything.
happened on January the 6th, division about whether collapse is real, division about climate collapse. Any subject seems to have bubbles of truth where people are just adamant and attacking each other and standing up for what they think is right, but so much trouble. So where is that in the collapsing systems that you know about?
Yeah. Well, I would love to answer that question from evolutionary biology, but it's always happens that there's so much infighting in a civilization that nobody notices the real enemy at the gates. And for me, the enemy for quite a long time has been climate. And we're so busy in conflict with one another, which here's where I go evolutionary biology and neurophysiology. When we are under threat as a human species, we retreat into the lower animal brain regions where we are only focused on survival. So it's all about self-protection. People are fighting for their lives with these conflicts around vaccines or what's the truth about anything. It's not motivated by rational behavior. It's motivated by survival needs. And so, to behave sanely and to behave with consciousness requires a real commitment to move from a place of fear and threat into a place of understanding. We have the capacities as humans, but it takes great dedication, discipline, and work to move just into the frontal lobes, to move into our human natures, which then answers the question, who do I choose to be? Because as long as we are under threat, this is what you will see. And I do think I've renamed this the age of threat.
Yes. Yes.
So, because everything is threatening, there's no stability anywhere. So it takes work to really want to be a human being.
Well, I first met you actually via a CD when you were
Right.
co-teaching Fully Alive with Pema Chodron. And one of the things you talked about was the Chinese symbol for patience, which I just
And
really
perseverance. And
perseverance.
perseverance.
Yes, which I loved, which was the knife hanging over a heart.
A
And
human heart. That's
yes,
right.
and that seems such the symbol for the times, doesn't it?
Well, it is, and it's then how do we respond to threat, which is the knife, feeling always at risk. And it cuts open our hearts. I've spent a lot of time giving various interpretations as a Chinese character. It's filled with potential meanings. And one is we're always at risk. Physically, we're at risk. If you're a leader or you're trying to do good these days, you're at risk of having your whole reputation destroyed on social media by people who don't care anything about you. But the other interpretation that I really love is that our hearts are cut open by the amount of suffering we see, by what's going on in so many places. And when our heart is cut open, what comes out is compassion. The higher human qualities of generosity and caring and creativity are available to us when we allow ourselves to be opened to what's happening and then not respond or react from fear, not get scared to death, not withdraw, but then realize, oh, I see what's happening. maybe there's some way I could contribute to alleviate the pain and suffering of somebody else.
There's so many questions coming all at once to
Yes.
ask you, Meg, and I feel like I want to open up the Hopi Prophecy and then question from there, because you received this prophecy in 2009.
No, the prophecy was given to the world in 2000
Okay.
at the turn of the millennium.
Yeah.
And then it was in my awareness, but it was a Hopi pipe carrier who I met with in, I think, 2009. And I asked her, she's English American, but she's a pipe carrier. She has the greatest honor from the Hopi people. She's now gone, but Ann Dozier was her name. Um, and I said, what are the elders saying to you? She said, they're telling us to pay attention to the prophecy, to the river.
Okay. And
Yeah,
do you think we could just speak that prophecy so that we've got it all?
sure.
Yeah.
I think I can remember it all. Here now is a river running very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hang on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. The elders say, let go of the shore, push off from the shore, go to the middle of the river and keep your head above water. Know that the river has its destination. The elders say, see who is there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing seriously, least of all ourselves. Gather yourselves. Everything we do now must be done in a spirit of celebration. For we are the ones we have been waiting for. That's a borrowed phrase from the African American poet June Jordan, who wrote that about South African women in their very famous protests against the banning laws in South Africa. So it has a lot of multiple cultural dimensions. But the key parts that I have stressed with people are certainly we do need to not hold on to the past, because that is what destroys our capacity. But when we push off into the middle of the river, we have to see who's there with us and celebrate. And we're not to take this personally, to not take anything seriously, but more that means personally. Don't play the victim. Don't think it's, how it's disturbing your life. Just stay in the middle of the river, which to me is the place of service. And we are the ones we've been waiting for. We appear historically at every time of cultural collapse, and it's always only a few people. This is the Shambhala warrior myth. This is the training I lead for warriors for the human spirit. We are never a mass movement, but we're very we have answered the question, who do I choose to be?
There's so much in that prophecy. There's something so beautiful in hearing it too. But that when you were talking about being taken by the big emotions, because there's so many big emotions around threat, and this
Yeah.
idea of clinging to the shore. Do you feel that refers to reacting in fear rather than more letting go? And
Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
It's just clinging. It's survival, isn't it?
yeah.
There are those who will cling to the shore, and they will suffer terribly. Yeah, it's
And at
all
the
about
same time, it doesn't sound so
self-protection.
good to go to the middle of the river, does it?
It doesn't, and that's a place of great threat.
Mhm.
So that's the place of the knife over our hearts, but it's the only way to to contribute and not just be in survival mode.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know?
Mm.
I've always been intrigued by the one part of the prophecy which I yet do not understand. Know that the river has its destination.
I felt the same thing when you said
Yeah.
that. I missed that
I have
earlier.
no idea what they mean. I don't get caught up in this casual optimism that says, well, everything is working out well, or everything is working on our behalf, or we are evolving as a species, because none of that is true historically,
Mm.
and it's not true now.
Mm.
So, but I don't know what they meant by it. So
Yes, well, maybe not evolution in terms of progression, but certainly a direction that's unknowable.
well, that raises, we could have a whole conversation about what evolution means. We confuse it, make it a synonym for progress, but it's
Yes,
not. It's
yes.
just how species adapt to current circumstances so they can survive.
Mm.
And that's why we're seeing all this terrible behavior that
Yeah.
is in itself suicidal,
Mm.
but we seem to have no choice because we're adapting to circumstances by by using the most base human experiences of anger, aggression, self-defense.
Well,
Yeah.
coming from, I'm 61 now. So in my early years, everything felt like it was getting better. Now
Yes.
I understand that's not an indigenous perspective whatsoever, but from a
It's
middle
not
class
even a
white,
classical Western perspective. It's
yeah,
only 300 years old.
yes, yes, yes. So
Yeah.
so we're bearing that in mind. Still, in my
Yeah.
experience, I grew up the 60s, the music, the political changes, and then we've seen this whole turn, and still some people will say, no, we have to go into the dark and then we come out into the light somehow. Not how I see it, but it is a lot to sort of contain all these dreams that I thought might have happened are not happening.
Well, that's a very, very good sensitivity for us all to have, which is I want to set the stage for this by what you started to draw. Things are now going down. Well, it's a cycle. Everything in life is cyclical.
Mm.
There's birth, maturing, harvesting, and death. Everything alive exists cyclically.
Mm.
When we got into the myth of progress, we thought, no, no, it's just going to get better and better and better and better. We are at the top of evolution. We'll solve our problems with technology. We'll do everything because we had this belief in progress. And then we see the downturn, the disappointment of all that we thought we could accomplish. Most importantly, we thought we could create massive amounts of change in the human condition. Those of us who are activists working for justice, alleviation of poverty, equity, these issues that are front and center right now, environmental, saving the planet, all of these things have led to this deep, despairing disappointment. And what I want us all to do is recognize that we were people who wanted to make a difference. We are still people who want to contribute, but the nature of the contribution has changed because the reality has changed.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm finding is some people can make that shift, but other people are clinging ever more desperately to this belief that we're going to evolve enough in our consciousness, we're going to turn it all around, the universe is working on our behalf, or other forces don't want us to kill ourselves the way we're set on doing. And so some of us are still clinging to the myth of progress and just bringing in unknown outside factors that will save us. And then, some of us, this is the question I always ask, let's assume there's still an important contribution to be made, but you've got to look at the situation
Yes.
and then see what's needed rather than what you wanted to have happen,
Yeah,
what is needed.
yeah, that's really well said. And you know, when you put it in
Uh,
that context right next to the prophecy too, I can feel like, you know, the belief in it's going to be all okay is like hanging on, and recognizing where we're going is part of, you know, just hands off, trusting the flow of the river. And then, you know, when you come to that, it's like, well, what to do? And I think I mean, there's a whole series of questions here, but one of the things that most interrupts my flow, and if it interrupts my flow, then I'm probably speaking for many here,
yeah.
it's fear. And,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, sadness, okay, anger, okay. I can sort of move with both of these. I mean, a lot of people don't, but personally, I can. You know, I allow myself anger, I allow myself sadness. But the fear comes in, and you know, I get
Yeah.
afraid for the young people. I get afraid for this, but I also just get selfishly afraid for me, which then starts to
Sure.
impact what I do. And I'd love to hear how you deal with that yourself.
Yeah.
And you know, in terms of letting go of the shore here, this is one of the ways that I cling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think fear again is absolutely present. I would add to that despair.
Yeah.
Despair is a bigger issue for me now, maybe because I've worked with fear.
Mm,
But we just have to understand that fear is a legitimate response to waking up to what's going on,
mm,
but it's not the emotional place from which we can do anything of benefit,
mm,
anything healthy for ourselves, because it destroys us. Um, any of these strong emotions, anger destroys us, fear destroys us, overwhelming grief that doesn't modulate destroys us. So the question is, what do I do with the fear? And there's a lot of teachings that, you can't know fearlessness unless you know fear.
mm,
And the path from fear to fearlessness is not getting stuck in the fear.
mm,
Recognize it as legitimate, but not helpful if you really want to stay healthy personally and you really want to find ways to make a contribution. So, one of the practices I teach, which I got from another teacher years ago, is when I feel fear, I just say, there is fear. I don't say, I am fearful. I don't own it. I don't make it me.
mm,
But I say, there is fear. I place it outside of myself.
mm,
There are some wonderful practices for just getting curious about what the fear looks like.
mm,
That's a possibility. But then there's also what I find is the most nourishing practice is to say, I wonder, just like me, how many people are experiencing fear at
mm,
this moment.
mm,
And when you do that, you're opening your heart, your awareness of other people, and then you can get curious about them.
mm,
And then you can offer them a moment of peace or a moment of prayer. And so it goes from this is where it does correspond in some way to the Hopi prophecy, but this is the practice in called Tonglen, giving and receiving. You use your own emotional distress, whatever it is, fear, sadness, loneliness, despair, and you externalize it first. There is despair. And sometimes I say this like a mantra over and over again. But then the next question relieves me of my own suffocating feeling, because these emotions feel very suffocating and claustrophobic. If you just ask, get curious, just like me, I wonder how many other people are experiencing
mm,
fear at this very moment.
mhm,
You don't have to get historical. You're just at this very moment.
Mhm.
And you'll come up with millions, hundreds of millions of people who are feeling fear at this moment. And then you've got your heart cut open, but then what you experience is compassion for them.
Mm,
And we're also developing a very rich, nourishing connection to this is what it means to be human.
mm, mm,
But see, you're using your consciousness,
mm,
not going back into reptilian self defense.
mm.
Protection, you're saying, oh, I'm going to use this feeling to connect with other human beings because fear is a natural part of being human. Despair is, loneliness is, you know.
Mm,
It's
mm,
a beautiful practice.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, i- on that CD that I listened to so many years ago, on repeat, I might add, um, Pema was talking about the charnel ground practices, which is a way of deliberately going to meet fear. Like people would actually go
Yeah.
deliberately
Yeah.
to get there. Yeah, and
That's the highest level practice for in Asian traditions. But even Pema is no longer speaking about that. She's teaching this practice of Tonglen
okay,
with great focus. How do we experience the terrors of what's going on with compassion?
yeah,
Because compassion is a human experience.
yeah,
It's not the self protective,
yes,
defensive
yeah,
position.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really interesting sort of having this conversation, Meg, because I'm understanding that prophecy now from a different perspective. Um, that idea of see who's there with you in the middle of the river, it's almost like when we've got our hearts open here, we can actually take in the people around
Yes.
us, so that we're not alone. Because, fear is, it's like, how am I going to survive? Like all those questions, like,
It's
how am I going
pure
to survive?
survival.
Pure
Pure
survival.
survival.
Yeah. And we
So
may
you
not
use
survive. That's the question that might not have a happy answer. So it can't be reliant on,
okay. So
yeah,
here, let me
yeah,
make the distinction here. You
go.
just shifted this.
Yeah.
So are we all about just wanting to survive?
Mm,
That is the lower animal evolutionary way we work.
mm,
As humans, as human beings, what else is possible with our lives?
mm,
And then it's not about survival. It's not all these movies where people are battling each other to death over scarce resources.
mm,
Then it becomes a true spiritual question in every spiritual tradition.
mm,
What am I going to do to help other people?
mhm,
What am I going to do to express love
mm,
and caring and compassion?
mhm,
And is that may kill me? That may lead to the end of my material existence. So what? We have achieved what could not be achieved by staying in the reptilian brain. We have achieved a higher level of consciousness, of love.
mm,
So, what is really fundamental here, and I know this isn't easy, it isn't easy at all, but since spiritual leaders have been saying this to us for millennia,
mm,
the question is how do I define a meaningful life? Is it survival?
mm,
Do I want to hole up in a bunker? Do I want to have enough food that I will fight to defend if anyone tries to take it from me? Or do I want to, go out offering something? Like we see all the war stories, all the people who sacrifice their own lives. And it's very difficult to talk about sacrifice in this culture
yes.
because we are so damn entitled,
Oh my God.
right?
Mm,
But if you go back, I mean, that's our prison, that
yes.
we think meaningful lives is we do well individually on these criteria of success and money and health, even. But if you look throughout human history, who are the people that we really respect? And they were people who were willing to give everything. on behalf of others. And depending on your faith, that leads to certain possibilities.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I always loved that Native American tradition um, before it was banned by the colonists when they came in. But the Native American tradition, the potlatch ceremony, where people would come together once a year and just share the wealth. So it was all even once a year. And
and that was the leader's role, to create abundance in the potlatch,
mm,
which was a very different definition of leadership. How much can I give to you?
yes, yes. Yeah,
You
that's
know,
about as different as it can be. It's incredible.
that's
You know,
right.
you people say, "Oh, well, why is this civilization going to collapse?" It's not hard to see, is it? When you look at
Right.
that difference right there. Um, I certainly, in terms of my own fear, just because staying with this for a moment, I know that I do a lot better when I feel like I have something to do and
Right.
something to give. And this is a lot of your work in the Shambhala warrior training. Maybe could you just say a little bit about what it is that
Yeah.
you do there?
Well, there's a lot on my website uh, to describe what the essence of warrior training is. And we teach how to have a stable mind so you don't get triggered all the time, so you're not this hyper reactive person, so that you can be in the places where you need to be and be the presence of both insight and compassion. And insight, you have to clear your filters. You have to know how you're filtering reality and be committed to seeing more clearly.
Mm,
And compassion seems to be easy, but with so many issues, problems presenting themselves, and our normal human reaction of despair or fatigue or downright totally wanting to withdraw, these are all quite common.
mm,
We really have to learn how to discern what is possible for us as compassionate action. But of course, we can be compassionate in our day to day. And we teach mind body awareness, how to stay grounded, how to use the energy of the body. But the big thing is, it's based on a commitment that I want to serve other people. And just moment to moment, I think everyone has this experience, but now it's a practice. When I'm in the midst of despair or overwhelm or exhaustion, I look around and say, who needs me? Or who could benefit from my attention? Or if that's not a work, where am I going to take my dog for a walk? Just to get out of my head
yes.
with all this travail. And being present moment to moment for other people is the greatest antidote to our personal suffering and despair.
Mm,
And then you find, well, this is really pleasant. This is delightful because no matter what's going on in the larger world, I just felt in this exchange there was a real sense of being human, of compassion, of relationship. And that's what keeps us going no matter the outside circumstances.
It's almost like unselfishness. Uh, so the recognition that giving ourselves away more fully actually
Right.
relieves the suffering.
And most other cultures, not Western, but would never get into this thinking, well, this is selfish unselfishness. No, this is Ubuntu. This is that's from South Africa, but it exists as a concept throughout Africa. Of understanding, the definition of Ubuntu is a person is only a person through other people,
Mm, mm,
or I exist through you and you exist
mm,
through we.
mm,
So we never question that relationship is our life. It's a definition of being human. So we don't think about selfishness or what I'm getting from this. See, that's the great Western curse, to think about, well, what am I getting from this?
Mm.
That's the ultimate definition of what has destroyed Western culture. We're all in it for ourselves, and it's unending
Yeah,
greed.
yeah. It's almost it's like we were well, certainly I was born into this system,
Yeah.
and you look around, like that's the air that we breathe. That's
And we think
all
it's
the
all humans, but
yes,
it ain't. It
yeah,
ain't.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's not even what humans have done in the past. So it's not even, this is a
No, it's
particular,
it's purely modern Western culture.
yeah,
And it's a great prison. And now, as we have to deal with all of the consequences and climate catastrophes and climate failures and a collapsing set of systems that will lead to great hardship and suffering, we have to understand, we have to personally choose to break out of this
yes.
set of
Mm,
cultural beliefs
mm,
and understand there is great delight, even joy, in being present for another person,
mm,
or being focused on how can I serve this situation right
mm,
now.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
I look, one of the other questions that, certainly that's a question that comes to me a lot, that I wanted to bring to you, because I know you've mothered 7 children. You're a grandmother to 23. You're a great
No,
grandmother.
it's up to 24, and great grandchildren is now at 9.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very big family. Now, most parents that I know can't get their head around what's happening, and they don't want me to speak to their children about
Right.
what I
I
see.
agree with them. I agree with them, by
Yeah,
the way.
so I'd love to hear your perspective as a mother, grandmother, etc., great grandmother.
So I get asked the question a lot, what about the children?
Yeah.
And first, we have to recognize that they're getting a lot of information. I mean, I listened during the first months of the Ukraine war to a few European fathers who were saying, my children are coming up and asking me, is there going to be nuclear war? Now, they hadn't talked to them about it, but the kids were picking up, even 6-year-olds were asking that.
Yeah.
So then the issue is not, we don't have to explain things to them. I think what we have to do is help them develop a sense of safety within our family, first of all, which is can be an illusion, but it's so necessary for kids. And then you encourage them to find some way they can contribute locally. Maybe it's in their school, maybe it's in their neighborhood, maybe it's something larger. I mean, we have a Dutch educator, Huus Gijssen, who lives and works in Amsterdam, but he has developed Warrior for the Human Spirit training for 13 and 14-year-olds.
Wow. Wow.
And
Brilliant.
he's summoning them to a higher purpose, a
Mm,
new role to play.
mm,
And they now are in relationship with children in Nepal who are also working on the issues that most affect their communities. And we're trying to spread this now to other places where there are warriors in training who are in school positions to really get kids engaged, but not in the big picture, just locally. What can I do here?
mm,
Because none of us can address the situation at the level it needed to be addressed, and now it is too late.
mm,
So the question is, find meaningful work that's relating, serving, helping somebody in your neighborhood, some group in your neighborhood,
mm,
um, and that is meaningful for kids. And yet, I I feel enormous compassion for teenagers,
mm.
especially who are groundless, who have never been given a sense of values, and only have this virtual reality of fake popularity So we have to ground them,
Mm.
and you can ground them in developing a relationship with life, with nature, with the natural world. Um, and But they don't need any more details that are terrifying for all of us,
Yes.
especially for the children, younger children. It's just unbearable if we were to tell them. But on the other hand, we also want to not deny the reality that they're tuning into. And I'll say finally, as a mother and grandmother, a long time ago, I never worried about should we bring in more and more children. I always felt, and it wouldn't have made any difference had I said that to my stepchildren and children, but
Yeah.
I allow that the children coming in now and that are here now are here on purpose, or at least some of them, just like we felt we came in with some sense of awareness and wanting to do good work. I credit that with my grandchildren. Not all of them. Some of them are going to be totally wiped out when consumerism fails them, but most of them have very strong sense of values. Um, and that's what I check for. Like, do you have the inner strength to keep going no matter what happens in the external environment?
Mm.
And I think that's our responsibility also as parents and grandparents. Make sure they have a strong connection to the true values that support human life.
Mm. Mm.
So,
I love that, Meg. And
yeah,
how do we bring them into the middle of the river as well? That idea,
yes.
that those same values that are
Teaching
going to
them
help
to
us,
swim.
teaching them
Teaching them
to
to swim means giving them an unshakable sense of values, what's really important in life.
Mm.
And to do that, we're going up against this incredibly powerful culture of materialism and popularity and virtual reality. So it's an increasingly difficult job.
Oh my, and the virtual reality world just keeps growing exponentially. It's almost,
Yes.
well, sometimes I feel like with the teenagers that they've already left this reality. They've already gone.
Yeah. But it's
Um,
happening now at younger ages. I mean, one of the things is quite discernible. I do watch this not only in my grandchildren, but generally.
yeah,
By the age of 9, they are addicts to
yeah,
any device. I mean, they're truly addicts. And now I'm watching, you know, 2-year-olds, 5-year-olds, just whenever a device is available, they know where it is and they try and get on it.
mm,
It's terrifying, actually.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's, part of me is like, well, who can blame them? When you see how much craziness is in the physical reality that we're living in, who can blame them wanting, looking for some kind of escape?
But, well, they're not, no, they don't even make that choice. It's just so seductive and
Mm.
mind hypnotic for them. But the worlds that they are in are basically violent worlds, violent
Yes,
games,
it's true.
games of opposition.
Mm.
Um, I was recently looking at games that introduce children into farm practices, healthy farm practices. And two of them were about first you defeat the aliens, or first you defeat some enemy, and then you can create a farm.
Yeah,
It's just there,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So we're not only creating addicts with virtual reality, but we're creating violent
Mm,
addicts.
mm,
It
mm.
is beyond tragic to see it happening. Yeah.
So, Meg, as somebody who kind of, occupies the place in the world that you do, um, I imagine you've also got the questions that come and press on you in the present moment. Like, how can you not have questions come when we're all
Right.
kind of face to face with this. So I'm wondering, what are the questions that are most burning for you at this time?
Well, the questions that are most burning, there's two levels. So there's the what do I see is going on with people that I might find a way to address, to comfort or to clarify. And that's all of my work in warrior training and knowing how hard it is for us to give up saving the world and just encountering, taking in the level of suffering that is increasing exponentially. But I also experience that personally. So I feel that without my spiritual practice, I would be completely lost at this point. I'm hearing this from a lot of the warriors that, our morning practices of meditation, centering, just going more deeply in being free of these terrible emotions just by meditating, just by watching our thoughts, just by settling in. That without that, we're all lost. But I hold the same questions of like, how much more can I bear? How much more am I capable of bearing? And that's been in question in warriors, among warrior community. How can I hold all of this? And for me, that's a constant challenge because the intensity of events and focused on human suffering caused by all these terrible forces of greed and self-preservation and everything that's going on. I have to answer that question on a very regular basis. I also answer the question of what's the point? I mean, we know it's all ending, so what's the point of doing anything? That I have an answer for, but it takes working back to it. I mean,
Yes.
it's an exercise
Yeah.
of, well, I'm not going to stay in despair. I'm not afraid of my despair any longer. That's a big deal for me. I know it will pass. I sometimes describe myself now as I am a theater repertoire company. I have several versions of me that appear in a single day, you know? So the Meg who's in despair is one character. The Meg who loves this kind of exchange is another character. The Meg who worries about getting old and losing her physical vitality is another character. The old lady who hobbles on stage meets up with the despairing person, Meg, who's sitting in a corner wondering, how am I going to go on? And then the great teacher, Meg, comes in and just makes everything okay. you know? Or the student, Meg. I'm doing some very different work now, and I'm just loving the energy of creating in a whole new domain. So I just allow that I'm going to manifest, and I really advise this for all of us. I've had warriors at the end of a day assess how many different versions of you showed up today. The person who was angry at a meeting, the person who was loving and respectful to your partner, the person who did something good with your kids, the person who lost it with your kids. But what's good about this practice is there's no one me.
See.
And then I can choose how I want to be, and that takes discipline and practice. Um, and also, as I just said rather casually, I am no longer afraid of despairing Mick. I know she's playing her part, and then another actor will come in and say, well, let's just get to work. Let's work on this today, and then everything is fine. So we have to take ourselves very lightly. This is definitely from the prophecy, not taking ourselves personally, because the moment we do, it goes on to say, our spiritual growth and development come to an end. And what if we saw this whole test, challenge, awfulness as just a way to awaken our fully spiritual natures as human beings, our creativity, our caring, our kindness, our compassion, our wisdom, not located in success or failure or making good change or seeing that good change didn't happen, but just being fully awake, you know?
I
Then
love
we'd
that.
stop bitching so much about our current states.
Yeah, I really love that. I'm just thinking, into our quite recent past, those Uvalde shootings and the Buffalo shootings, and how there's this sort of wave of despair and powerlessness and frustration that kind of
Yes.
sweeps out. Certainly, I mean, I'm in Australia, we felt it too. It's like
Yeah.
this kind of global community. But I love what you're saying in terms of, well, my despairing, frustrated, powerless, whatever that aspect of me will be present for a little bit of time when that news comes, and when
Yeah.
when there's no changes in the gun laws, because there never will be. When
Right.
I hear that, I feel that, and okay, that will have its time, and then back we go. And I like that sense
Yeah.
of flowing between different selves, um, because you can't not have those feelings. It's just insane.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. If you're going to stay awake in this world, you're going to have terrible, terrible feelings.
Yes.
And powerlessness, I think for many of us, myself included, is a new feeling.
Yes.
I don't like it at all. And yet, I use it now in this practice of Tonglen to really tune in to the billions of people who have felt powerless their whole lives. All that does is awaken more compassion for them. I know it's only getting worse. So it's such a tightrope we're on here that, you can feel more compassion for the suffering, but you can't solve the suffering.
Yes. Yes.
What a terrible place to be, but it's a well occupied tightrope throughout human experience.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
just thought we could do more, and we can't. We thought we could change things at a level which we can't. So it all comes down, for me, very personal, local work. I use the quote from President Teddy Roosevelt: do what you can, where you are, with what you have.
Mm,
And that gives us good work.
mm, mm,
And then we just hold the grief of this time.
mm,
It's unimaginable grief, really.
mm, mm.
Um, but we do what we can where we are with what we have.
Yeah. Look, thank you so much, Meg.
Oh, you're welcome.
I really do. So I'm so touched by what you've shared, and I think one of the things that I feel is sometimes when collapse awareness, when people are holding collapse awareness, they lose a sensitivity to the grief and all of those things that you've mentioned. And I don't. And I'm sure that there's many that don't. And so just hearing you speak about that was just such a sort of
Yeah.
a balm for me. So appreciated, and so appreciate your work. And I'm going to put some links down underneath this to where
Yes,
people can.
please.
So do the warrior training you lead, just to put this out there, like, is that a yearly thing? Like, what happens
No,
if people want to come in?
we're finishing up this weekend with our current crop. We did 5 months of training, but it's very uncertain to me how it's going to next manifest
Okay.
or in what form. Although people can go to my website and check out the Warrior Songline, because that is a complete introduction to the whole, but the journey of becoming a warrior for the human spirit.
Mm,
And it's very beautiful work. It's very evocative
mm,
as well as descriptive. And also I would attract attention to a tab at the top of my homepage website, which simply says current thinking.
Current thinking.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that has podcasts, webcasts,
Yeah.
and one or two articles there also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
But it's what we do with our grief that, I mean, so many people are now focused on grief, sharing their grief, experiencing the fullness of their grief. But then I wonder, so what are you going to do with it now?
yes. See.
So for me, the conversion or the next step that's missing in too many self help approaches is, how am I going to serve?
Yeah.
How am I going to serve?
Yeah.
And that's the question, where we find satisfaction and even joy in those moments. So,
Mm. Yes, look, so much to consider, and thank you for your work. I hope we get to speak again, Meg. I've just really enjoyed this. Mm.
well, thank you. All you have to do is contact me when the time feels right.
Great, great.
But thank
Okay.
you for very good exploration together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really touched, Meg. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Ciao.